Last week at the Public Works Finance Committee meeting, I brought forward a proposal to have the 3 existing asphalt tennis courts at Ghormley Park removed. They've been out of service for over 10 years, as I understand it, and the proposal calls for the installation of a new post-tension concrete tennis court setup with the pertinent amenities such as fencing, net posts, line striping, and so forth. The cost of the proposal, including the base bid, 1 alternate, concrete testing services, and a 10% contingency fund, brought the total proposal cost to just a shade over $200,000. The Public Works Finance Committee then had a lively discussion as to the cost benefit of the proposal to the city, and if indeed this would be in the best interest of the city to spend $200,000 on 3 tennis courts at this point in time. The committee then, after further discussion, unanimously voted to recommend to the full city council that the 2 bids that were submitted for the project be rejected. So I'm bringing that proposal to you tonight, and we'll stand for any questions or what have you, Your Honor.
Okay, Wayne, the Public Works and Finance listened to this last Monday.
We did, and been presented pretty well by Tom as to our discussion. We had a pretty good discussion as to cost benefits for 3 tennis courts for $200,000. The fact that they haven't been used for 10 years and the price was $50,000 more than what the engineering estimate was is an extraordinary amount of money. And so the Public Works and Finance Committee just could not make a recommendation to accept that or to reject the bids. Our feeling was that the bids needed to be rejected. Whether they would be rebid at a later date would be up to the city to make that determination. But we thought it would be a good idea to let the full council have a discussion on this also.
Okay. There was a gentleman during the public comment. Even though this is not a public hearing, I'll let you come up and testify if you come to the podium and give us your name, address. Yeah, he can do it if you want him to. Doesn't matter, just and tell us what's on your mind. Give us your name, your address, sir. And
my name is John Kovach. I'm the head tennis coach at Moscow High School. And I read the article that was in the Daily News, and I just wanted to comment on how much use that those courts probably would receive, and it would be substantial. Right now, at least during the spring when we have our seasons, the courts are blocked off from 3 o'clock to about 7 o'clock when the light permits. During that time, we have 50 plus players on 6 courts, and any people in the community who want to use those courts are blocked off during that time. Usually during that time as well, the University of Idaho courts are being used by the tennis team there and by students at the university, and so the public really is limited of where they can play in the afternoon during the prime times during the spring. I've been in Moscow for a while off and on, and we did use, the high school did use, back when I was an assistant coach in the 90s, those courts at West Side in order to prevent us having to have limited court times and dividing our practices. Right now we have to divide our practices. Our varsity only gets about an hour and a half at the most of hitting time to make sure that our JV players get adequate time to improve and fill those positions later on. So we're splitting our time with those courts. In the past, we used those courts so we could have practices at the same time, varsity and JV, where now we have to divide them up. So they were being used substantially during that time. And again, I wanted to also address the community not being able to use those courts during that blocked off time during the spring. And I know that as a community member, that can be discouraging.
John, a couple of questions for you. How long have you been a tennis coach at Moscow High?
This is my second year at Moscow High, but like I said, I coached as assistant for 3 years back in the 90s. And was
Okay,
also,
well, it's back in the 90s is 20-plus years ago, so let's just talk about the last few years. Do you know, were you here prior to 2 years ago, like in the last 5 years, 10 years?
no, I've been here, this is my second year coaching, but my third year here
Okay.
working at the district. And
Okay.
we've had, like I said, the last 2 years, 50-plus players during the springtime trying to organize practices on
Okay,
6
my
courts.
second question to you is, during that 3 years that you've been here, have you used those courts down at Ghormley?
They're not serviceable.
Okay, so they have not been usable for
They
you
have
guys.
not been
Okay,
serviceable.
all right. That was my question. Does anybody have, Walter, you got a question for?
Yes, sir, just to make sure I understand what you're saying. The only courts Moscow has now are owned by either the university or by the school district.
I'm not sure who owns the courts. I'm assuming they're owned by the school district, but obviously they're paid by taxpayers.
Well, no, my point is that it appears that we do not have any
We do not
public
have,
courts
we do not have public
where the public
park-
can
for
pull up
parks
and
exactly.
use without some artificial restriction on, no, this is team time, you can't be on these, or this is after school time, you can't be on here now.
That's correct.
And Ghormley, and I don't know tennis, I don't play tennis, appears that Ghormley was the only public, I'm looking at Gary, he would know, only public tennis courts that have been available in the past in Moscow.
It's the only tennis courts owned by the city. If you look in the packet, Dwight has in the packet recounting of the tennis courts, who owns them, and if they are available. Essentially what his memo, if I can paraphrase it, Dwight's here, but that those are available whenever they are not being used for classes or for team sports at both the University of Idaho and Moscow High School. So, as the coach indicated, in the afternoons when there is practice, I can't say what the demand would be at that time. I will say that in my discussions with Dwight, that the city courts as well would also likely have a Parks and Rec use on them that would make them unavailable for general public use. And, of course, the obvious thing is if Ghormley Park courts are being used by the Moscow High tennis team, they wouldn't be available for public use during that time either.
Okay.
Thank you, Coach.
Thank you.
You bet. Well, how would council like to move forward with this? Questions for Tom?
Wayne had a hand.
Wayne?
I went out and last week and walked through that area, looked at the courts, and had a discussion with some of the school district staff pertaining to the use of West Park School in that particular area. Most people probably are not aware that West Park does not have its own playgrounds. They have one small triangle area directly south of the school, but the kids go out and play on the ball fields. They play on city-owned property, Parks and Rec property. And that is the only hard-surfaced area that's available for recreational purposes for West Park School. They do have some special needs children. They have, there's a little girl that's autistic, and she has constant adult supervision, and for whatever reason, some of these special needs children are not able to play on a turf area, and so they do have a need for a hard-surfaced area. I'm still not going to support spending $200,000 to rebuild these tennis courts. I just can't, in good conscience, say that. But I would like to see the Parks and Rec Department and the city have a little bit more discussion, maybe have some discussion with the school district as to maybe some of the ideas that they may have. Perhaps there's a situation where the city could deed the property to the school district until such time as the school is no longer there, and allow the school district to worry about what they want to do with it if they want to do some type of work. I'm not even so excited about spending the money to tear up all the concrete and put sod down in that small area. It just doesn't seem like a worthwhile space to me after having visited to spend that kind of money on. So I'm going to make a motion to what?
Reject the bids.
Reject all the bids. And then direct staff to have continuing discussions on that property.
I wonder if I could ask Tom a question before that proceeds as a vote?
No,
There's no second yet.
and then we can discuss it.
Okay. Go ahead, Jim. You get the floor.
Tom, if those courts were to be renovated in some way, would it be possible to make them serviceable for high school practice or public use without complete demolition and redoing them? What would it take to resurface that? In other words, if you had Poe Asphalt come in and put another layer of asphalt on top of that and restriped it, as opposed to the complete demolition, is that a feasible thing to do?
In my opinion, that's not feasible at all. The site's in a floodplain that takes water on occasion. The asphalt that's there in the subgrade is not in good condition and is failing. We have cracks through the asphalt up to this wide. To do that would be
Yeah.
disastrous at
Do
best.
you have any idea what it would cost to put another layer of asphalt on that would last, let's say, 5 years?
I'm venturing into areas that I shouldn't, but it would be expensive, and I'd have to quantify the number. But it would not be inexpensive. And for the benefit gained, in 5 or 7 years, it's going to break and crack again, or sooner, because the ground is moving out there constantly.
Well, I used to mentor a child at West Park School, and we played soccer in there a lot because it was a place where the ball didn't roll away.
Correct.
And so it does have that use, the fences that you can play ball in there, and you don't have to chase the ball away. It doesn't go in the creek or anything.
Sure. And these courts have been reconditioned on more than one occasion, as I understand it, with either overlays such as you suggested or other things, but they've continued to deteriorate. And that was the reason for the proposal.
Art, you had a question? Yeah, I was going to say, part of the problem that I see is the magnitude of the bids to do this. I support having tennis courts in town, but I think the timing of the bid and the size of the bids preclude us going forward with them at this time. And I wouldn't mind seeing it come back in another 8 months or something to take better advantage of bid times on this, because right now, the companies have all got their bids out, and so, well, if we want to have it done, it's going to cost you. And I think we can do better in the whole process. Instead of jumping the gun to get it done now, wait for a while and go for the better bid later.
If I may, Your Honor, I have corresponded with the contractor who provided us the low bid, and the timing of the bids had nothing to do with the price. It's our location, the lack of available concrete screeds, and the fact that it's only 3 tennis courts, and to bring a concrete crew up for 2 weeks of work drives
So
the price.
perhaps we could team up with some of the other local municipalities and get a bulk discount by keeping our eyes open in the future and playing a little bit smarter with the whole bidding process. Walter, did you have a...
Dwight made my point regarding timing.
Okay.
I'd seen that memo.
Dwight.
Dwight, I'm sorry.
Jimmy got another question.
Tom, sorry.
In terms of
Sorry, Tom.
the location of these courts where they are now, if we did proceed and put in all new concrete courts there, they're still in the floodplain. They're still that issue still exists, eh?
That is correct, but post-tension concrete is designed to be a minimum of 20-year life expectancy, which is more than twice what we'd get with a typical tear-out and reinstall of asphalt. It's a much stronger, much more durable product, and it would be impervious to water and saturation issues.
Is there not another
And-
location that where we could do this where that wouldn't be an issue?
We have a number of open spaces around town, but that's not for me to comment on at this time. I will say that our assistant city engineer recommended that we do not go down the path of asphalt tennis courts in that site or recapping them. So, just,
Okay, well, with that, Gary's got something. You got a point you want to make, Gary?
Yeah, the only point I wanted to make is rejection of bids. The reason the agenda item says the recommendation is to reject all bids and provide staff further direction, as the council knows. staff just got finished, Parks and Rec Commission just got finished with a Parks and Rec master plan. And so it is possible to send this back, look at it through the prioritization that's in the master plan. Additionally, as we're going through our strategic planning process, one of the exercises that Parks and Rec is going through is to look holistically at the assets that are available in the city. And I realize that there may be times when tennis courts aren't available 24/7 for the use of the public, just walking up and using them. However, we have a limited amount of finances that we can bring to the table and a lot of needs. So, as Dwight's memo points out, just asking the council to consider this, as Dwight's memo points out, even under NRPA standards, the availability of tennis courts in the city meets the NRPA standards, whether you believe those standards are applicable to Moscow or not, and there are some who don't. Is that need being met? And in light of the limited resources available to the city, does it make sense to even take a look at redoing these? So just food for thought in the future.
Mr. Mayor, a comment, if I may, to Gary. In response, Gary, I don't have any problem with the stats, national stats, but I would question whether or not those are talking about a city where every available court has artificial limitations placed on it because of its ownership. In other words, it's taken out of the public availability because they're owned by either a university or by a school district. I understand the numbers and the fact that if you just look at the pure numbers, we've got plenty, but you take them out of circulation, you don't. I'll vote to reject the bids, but, you know, a room full of tennis players saying we need more courts probably would go a long way. Just a comment for the gentleman sitting out here. Thank you.
Okay, what we've got is a motion by Wayne, a second by Dan, to reject all bids in accordance with Section I-1B-8 of the contract specifications. I'll start with you, Walter.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so those bids will be rejected. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much.